So you can always access this later if you're not able to, or if you watch it and maybe someone else is in a different session and you're like, oh my goodness, you should have seen this. There's an opportunity too. So this will be recorded. Don't forget about your sketches. That is going to be done at the end of the conference. So tomorrow, after you're done with everything, then you'll fill out the sketch validation form. Remember, you need to have that done by next week, Friday. So that's when that's due. What else would I like to remind you all about? I would like to remind you of our Family Feud event tonight. We're very excited for that, not only because I'm the host, because that'll be very fun. And we're just very grateful for you all to be here. Right now, I am going to turn this over to Kim and Lori. They are from the Michigan Department of Education, and we are just very, very excited to hear about what we are going to learn about today. And I'm sure this is a very important topic. There is a sign-in in the chat box if you could access that. They'd like to follow up with emails, and so make sure you keep an eye on the chat for some important forms that are going to be in there. And thank you so much for being here, Kim. I send it over to you.
Thank you so much. And Renee, I don't know if it's possible, I don't see it on my end, and so it might not be set up on this Zoom account, but if it's possible to have closed captioning available for folks, that would be great. And if it's not set up, then we'll do our best. But if it is possible, that would be great to turn on. I don't see it on my end, so I
don't on mine either,
okay.
But I'm going to shoot a quick text message to Patrick and see if we can figure that out, Kim.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right, well, welcome everyone. I am so excited to be here, and I will introduce myself and let my colleague Lori introduce herself, and then we'll kind of jump into it. We don't have a ton of time, so we'll try to make the most of the time that we do have. My name is Kim Phillips-Knope. I am the project lead for the Michigan Department of Education's LGBTQ plus students project, and I use she, her pronouns. And Lori, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Sure, yeah, I'm Lori Beckover. I'm with the Michigan Department of Education. I am the HIV and sex education consultant with the department, but I also am the director on the LGBTQ students project. I forget if I mentioned I use she, her pronouns. And we're thrilled to be here. Working with those who work in alternative ed is such an important partnership because we know that often our students end up finding that that's their home, that they're most comfortable in. And so it's great to be able to connect with you and present today.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna jump right in. We start all of our trainings with a land acknowledgement, so I just want to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the Menominee, the Fox, Anishinaabe, Peoria, Chippewa, or Ojibwe, the Sioux, Mississauga, Odawa, Miami, Potawatomi, and other Native peoples who stewarded the land that we are on throughout the generations. We do want to share just a little bit about the project. For those of you who are not familiar, the LGBTQ plus students project has been around for about 20 years now. And a big chunk of what we do is what we're doing right here today, which is to provide trainings, professional development trainings. We do them in theory, in person. We'll look forward to doing that again at some point. And in online spaces as well. And then we also do technical assistance, and we have a monthly drop-in that we do. We worked with the State Board of Education when they passed their statement and guidance on safe and supportive learning environments for LGBTQ students. And then we also have a resource guide that we created. It's in its 7th edition, and it's in a hard copy right now. We're in the process of transitioning it to a digital sort of version. All right, so that is a quick introduction to us. And if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to introduce yourself, that would be great. If you feel comfortable sharing your pronouns, you can also, if you can put that in the chat as well, if you wanted to add them to your Zoom name, that would be great. But again, only if you feel comfortable. And just remembering that your pronouns are words that you want other people to use when they're referring to you. And then just for fun, I don't know, because we can, where you grew up, and on a scale of cat this morning, how are you feeling? I'm going with an 8. I'm about an 8 today. Yep, that's where I'm at. All right, I'll give folks a moment to kind of look that over. And you can start dropping your name in and your information. I see some folks did it in advance, which is great. Thanks. All right, make sure you have your CAT number picked out there. I'm going to advance the slide here. I'm actually going to go 2 slides just to give you a sense of our agenda here. We're going to do some introductions like we're doing right now, some setting the stage. Well, kind of this is the end of all of that. And then we're going to go into some language and terminology just to make sure we're kind of on the same page. We'll look at what the data says about the experiences of our LGBTQ plus students. We're going to touch briefly on law and policy, and then look at some strategies, and then we'll bring some closure to our time together. All right. So language and terminology, this is where we're going to start. I'm going to play a video here, and that kind of goes over, provides kind of a little bit of background, and then we'll dig in just a little bit more. But I want to play this, and let me know if you can't hear it. It starts off quiet, so if you don't hear something right away, it's not you. All right, here we go.
All right, folks, here we go. A romaine and kale salad with avocado, cucumber, shishito peppers, and 4 kinds of cheese. Sprinkled in balsamic straight from Italy.
Wow! In my day, salads only had 2 ingredients. A rock-hard wedge of iceberg lettuce and a stinky old dried-up tomato.
Sorry, guys. I'm gonna have to eat fast. Alex is stopping by in a few minutes to work on our robotics project.
Alex, is that the girl with that weird dog? Or the boy with the hat with the wings that flap?
No, Uncle Jay. This is Alex.
Oh, okay. I remember. A very nice young... Come to think of it, well, is Alex a boy or a girl?
Actually, Alex doesn't define themselves as boy or girl.
What else is there?
Back in your day, most people understood the world in terms of just boys and girls. But now, we know gender is more complex than that.
Wait, aren't we just talking about whether you're born with a or a hee?
When you're born, your sex is assigned in a medical way, but the sex listed on your birth certificate may not necessarily match your gender identity.
Gender identity is a person's inner experience of who they are in terms of gender, their deep personal sense of being male, female, a blend of both, or neither.
And while many people have a gender identity that's the same as their assigned birth sex of female or male, that's not always the case, because gender exists on a spectrum. Like transgender, which means a person whose gender identity is not consistent with their assigned birth sex. Non-binary, which means a person whose identity doesn't fall in the category of either male or female. And genderqueer or gender fluid, which means a person who does not identify themselves as having a specific gender at all.
Does gender identity have to do with being straight or gay?
Actually, no. Gender identity has to do with the way you feel about yourself, while sexual orientation is based on the way you feel toward others, the people you may or may not be attracted to.
You know, I really like Alex, and I can tell they're a good friend to you, but I'm still pretty confused about all of this.
That's okay. You don't have to fully understand someone to respect them. To start, try not to make any assumptions about a person's gender, and use the name and pronouns that they ask you to. Above all, be a friend or ally for people of all gender identities.
That's right, Mom. Oh, Alex is here. Come on in.
Hey, everyone.
Oh, hey, Alex. Care for some salad? The balsamic's right from Italy, you know.
All right. So that video provides a nice kind of overview, and then sorry, I've got like a weird light thing happening over here. I'm going to try to adjust. And then I always feel like it's helpful to just go in a little bit more detail, mostly because so in our culture we have a tendency to talk about these 4 things: the sex we were assigned at birth, our gender identity, gender expression, and our sexual orientation, as if they're the same thing. We kind of mash them together. But in fact, each of these identities is their own unique thing, and they're not necessarily related to each other. And so it can be helpful to just talk about each of them briefly so that we can kind of pull them apart from each other. So the first one is our sex assigned at birth, which is represented here where our external genitalia would be. And this is, a child is born and the doctor or midwife looks between their legs and says, penis, no penis, it's a boy, it's a girl. That's what goes on your birth certificate. And that's really how many of us are treated for the rest of our lives. And for many folks, that works out just fine. But for some of us, that doesn't work out as well. And that may be in part due to the fact that our biology is actually much more complex than just our external genitalia. So it isn't just what we see on the outside. The sex we are assigned at birth includes our chromosomes, our hormones, our internal reproductive organs, and our external reproductive organs. So this really important sort of piece of information is based on one aspect of our biology rather than sort of the whole of our biology. The next one is our gender identity, which is represented here on this person's head in your brain, because our gender identity is in our mind. It's who we know ourselves to be. Am I a man? Am I a woman? Am I some combination of man and woman? Or maybe neither of those terms really feel like they apply. But it's in my head. My gender identity is up here. It's who I know myself to be. Nobody knows anybody's gender identity unless we say it out loud to them. Our gender expression, which is represented with those flourishes there on the left, is how we perform our gender. It's how we sort of show our gender to the world. It's our clothes, our mannerisms, our hair, how we talk. All of those things are connected to the ways that we might express our gender in the world. And then our sexual orientation is represented there with the heart, because it's who we love, it's who we're attracted to, it's who we engage in sexual behavior with. But all of these are things, again, they're separate from each other, and one doesn't predict the next. So for instance, you might have a student who was, the sex they were assigned at birth was male, and their gender identity is male also. They identify as a man or a boy. And their gender expression maybe is they wear skinny jeans and they like to paint their nails, and maybe they wear makeup. We in our society, we have a tendency to stereotype that a man who dresses or a boy who dresses in ways that are stereotypically considered more feminine, that they must be gay. But in fact, we don't know anything about this particular student's sexual orientation based on any of those other factors that we know about them: their sex assigned at birth, their gender identity, or their gender expression. All of those things they're all unique to us. So I just want to pause for a moment. I went through that kind of quickly to see if there are any questions about anything that you're seeing here, anything that you heard in the video. And I know taking yourself off mute in a like Zoom space is sometimes harder, but I really want to encourage folks to take the risk and ask your questions. We want this time to be as meaningful for you as it can be, and so that might mean taking a risk and being vulnerable and asking questions. Gender, thanks for the question, Sharon. Gender fluidity is, so there are some folks who sort of move between different genders, and that so one day they may dress in a way that is considered more feminine, one day they might dress in a way that's considered more masculine, but their gender identity might be more fluid in that they kind of go back and forth in terms of how they feel about their identity and who they know themselves to be, that it's not static, it doesn't stay as one thing. It kind of can ebb and flow, and then that might show up in their gender expression through that more, sort of dress and things like that that look different from day to day.
Thank you. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
First, yeah.
Sure. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Scoliosexual. I swear every single training I get this question, which is I appreciate. And it was one that was new to me as well when I first saw this particular image and diagram, I guess. So there's, for some folks are attracted to transgender people, like that's part of the attraction in terms of, you know, who we're attracted to, and they might identify as scoliosexual. So it's folks who are attracted to transgender people. Pansexual. It's your definition is really close, Melissa. So yeah, pansexual is like when gender is just like it's just not something that's taken into consideration necessarily. People who identify as pansexual might say, you know, I'm attracted to a person not based on their gender, but based on sort of who they are in the world, and that, you know, their gender just isn't like it's not a defining factor. It's not sort of a make or break thing, which is kind of what differentiates it from bisexual, where gender might be part of what you're attracted to about somebody. And I just want to pause for a moment as I'm sort of defining things to remind folks that, you know, the words that we use to identify ourselves are really important. And the definitions that I'm giving you here are like broad definitions, but they're not the end all be all, like only definition for each of these terms. That if you have a student or somebody comes out to you and shares an identity word, it's really great to say like, wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing that information with me. What you tell me what that means to you? I want to make sure I understand. And that way it provides them with an opportunity to define for themselves what that word means to them. And it helps you build rapport and relationship with them. So I would definitely encourage folks to ask, so that you let your students define their own identities for themselves. So hopefully, I just always want to remember to keep that in mind, that what I'm saying is not like, you know, the final word on how to define each of these terms. Somebody asked if all of these the sort of different identity words that I'm talking about and that are on this diagram, are they new? Have they always existed? Some have existed, some are new. The thing is, Lori is saying, language is constantly changing. It evolves over time. And, you know, I think the fact that there are so many different words that people use to identify themselves really speaks to how important it is that we are seen and known authentically for who we are, and that we want the nuance of our identities to be understood, that is important to us. There's a great quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson. He talks about creating new words and how amazing and how like what an exceptional thing it is to take a new concept and apply a new word to it, to actually create a brand new word that captures a new concept. That's a really it's a really amazing thing to be able to do. Let's see, Tammy is asking, is asexual more about not being interested in intercourse or romance at all? Yeah, no, asexuality is its own identity. It is, it certainly can be permanent, or as people, you know, sort of come to understand their identity, it may change over time, as any identity can. But yeah, asexual, if folks who are engaging in sexual behaviors, sexual intercourse might not be, is just not something that they're drawn to. It's not, they don't feel a need for it or a desire for it. You may also hear folks identify as aromantic, and that would, again, sort of like just not have romantic feelings towards other people. And those are identities sort of in and of themselves, and they may be permanent, they may change over time, as you know is true with any sexual orientation or like identity word that folks might use. Yeah, asexual as your sexual orientation is different than when it comes to reproduction. All right, great. So there's just some great stuff happening in the chat, which is fantastic. And yeah, I just want to because somebody named it too, this idea that our sexuality, these identities are could potentially be temporary. They may, people, especially as you're working with adolescents or young people, you know, it's totally natural and normal for in fact, it's sort of developmentally appropriate and would be unusual if they weren't trying to sort of figure out who they are. That's what you're supposed to be doing developmentally in adolescence. And so as young people come to understand themselves, the words they use to describe their experiences might change. And it's also really important to honor people's identities for what they share with you, and to assume that what they're telling you is the truth. It's their truth. It might not be how you understand things, but that doesn't mean that their truth isn't the truth for them. And so we want to be cautious to not sort of question people or challenge their identities. That would be whether you intend it. You might have good intentions, but we can have good intentions and still cause harm. And that kind of questioning could potentially cause harm to a student or to any person. And so you should know that, and just sort of wanting to accept that what people are telling you is the truth to them. It's their truth, and that's what's important, and that you want to focus on the honoring what they've shared with you and the relationship building aspect of things. So it's a great question. I appreciate it being asked. The question about it being inherent or not, I'm going to talk about in just and I've got a slide that I'm going to sort of use to talk about that. Same thing with the question right after it. So hold on for just a moment, and I'm going to keep us going. One of the things that we always want to do in all of our trainings is make sure that you hear directly from young people talking about their experiences. And so we do this through TikTok videos right now, which is great. They're young people sharing quick snippets of their lives, and they're curating them and deciding what goes in them. So in this first set of videos, we are gonna hear from a group of young people talking about gender identity. And I'm gonna let them speak. Oh, the sound on the videos is kind of all over the place, so I'm just gonna give you fair warning. Some are very quiet, some are much louder. So just be ready with your finger on the volume.
Hi guys, so I've been getting a lot of questions about my pronouns recently, which makes sense because I'm a very androgynous person. But last night at about 2 a.m. I put in my bio that I identify as agender, which is different than non-binary, because non-binary is like neither gender, right? Agender is like the gray area between genders. It's neutral. And I feel that way because I don't like being associated or conforming to the stereotypes of either gender. So really any pronouns work: she, her, they, them, he, him, just whatever y'all feel like at the moment. It's all good. Thank you.
I just met these children who were like 2 years old, 3 maybe, 4, I don't know. And anyways, one of them went, "Are you a girl?" And I said, "Well, when I was born, the doctor said I was a girl, but that's not really how I feel." I said, "I'm not a girl or a boy." And they went, "Oh, that's called transgender. I read a book about it." Oh, the children are giving me hope.
So, to be honest, I was a boy first, then a girl, and now I'm a man. Let me explain. So, my mother got pregnant. They told her that she was having a boy. She was going to name me Jeremiah. So, you know, she bought all the boy stuff, did the whole 9 yards, and then she pushed me out, and I was a girl. By the age of 9, like, I already knew that I did not want to wear girls' clothes, that I wanted to wear boys' clothes. And when I was like 14, 15, you know, I was like a little stud. And then by the time I was like 17 and a half, I was like, you know what, this little feminine shit is just not cutting it for you, boy. You know what I'm saying? So I started my transition when I was 18. I'm 21 now, so I've been transitioning for nearly 3.5 years now. You know what I'm saying? Next step, we about to get this breast tissue up out of here, so I don't have this no more.
I remember the first time I heard gender fluid, I was like, does that mean that you just feel yourself as both? You don't have a limitation to gender? I was like, wow. It's like, that's beautiful. That makes me feel so much more at home.
So in this next series of videos, these young people are talking about their gender expression. So last set was gender identity. These are gender expression.
Oh my god, he's wearing a skirt. I know, right? It looks so good on him. What? No, he looks like a girl. Excuse me? Only girls wear skirts. What is he doing? Only girls wear skirts? You know, skirts were originally made for men. Men used to be the ones who always wore skirts. Then why are skirts in the girls section of stores? Because society decided that for some effed up reason, clothes should be given a gender. I just don't get why a guy would wear one. And I don't get why your masculinity is so fragile that a man being comfortable in the clothes he's wearing affects you in any way. And why you feel you have any place to comment when you dress like the weird uncle from an early 2000s Disney show.
So beautiful, just like you were an angel. Can I stop? Can I stay? Can I swim in your energy? Being hotter than shutting down.
Yo, what I gotta do to show these girls that I own them? Some call me Nikki and some call me Diamond. Skeezer, please, I'm in a visa. Whoa, just happy to knock my own sneaker. Sexy, sexy, that's all I do.
My mama told me never bow your head.
I feel glorious, glorious. Got a chance to start again. I was born for this, born for this.
All right. So we had, the kids are definitely all right. We had a couple of questions that kind of get at this idea of like, when do kids know? What does this look like? And what we know from research is that in general, kids have a sense of their gender identity between the ages of 3 and 5. So about the time that kids have that little kids start to have language, they can start to let you know if they're a boy or a girl. Usually they'll choose boy or girl because those are the only two options we've given them. But it's around that age that kids start expressing and understanding what gender identity is and what it means to them. When it comes to our sexual orientation or who we're attracted to, that develops a little bit later in upper elementary. Between the ages of 10 and 12, kids generally speaking start to like develop crushes and things like that. So that's when you might see that those things kind of playing out. So young little kids are fully 100% capable of talking about gender and gender role stereotypes and gender expectations and what it means to them and what they like or don't like about them. And then for our sexual orientation and crushes, things like that, that tends to develop a little later. Tammy, I am not totally following your question. So if you want to clarify, I would be happy to answer, but just let me know. So we are actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'd love to give you a chance to work in small groups just for a few minutes. We'll just have a few minutes here to connect and talk through just what you've heard so far and kind of what your initial reactions are and if there are any questions that you might have. All right. Are there any questions about your task in your groups here? All right, so I'm going to open the rooms. You'll have not a ton of time just because we don't have a ton of time. So probably take about 3 or 4 minutes to connect. And I'm trying to make the groups relatively small so that you've got time to talk. All right, here we go. Just accept your invitation. If you have any questions, please, or have trouble getting into your rooms, let me know. There are a couple of rooms that only have one person because folks haven't joined. Thank you very much. Here we go.
Kim, do you have questions you want me to type in the chat for processing?
Nope. It's okay. I mean, if you want to, you can, but. All right, I'm gonna put. Oh, there are folks who are in rooms by themselves. There we go.
My person in my breakout room was not able to chat. They were in class.
Oh, goodness. Catherine, what room are you in? I'll try to put you with somebody.
I was in 6, I believe.
Okay.
But that other person couldn't talk, so maybe in a different room.
All right. I'm gonna put you in 8 and see. You only have about 1 more minute, but
That's okay.
sorry. Next time maybe it'll work better. Sorry.
Okay,
I'm trying to like move people around for that
you didn't
reason.
know. You didn't know.
I wonder how many people are joining kind of while in classrooms teach it, like it's doing multiple things, probably a lot.
All right. All right, welcome back to the folks who are here. We've got just about 15 more seconds and then everybody will be back with us.
Which one? To 70 is a passing grade, but we require if you're testing out, they do a 77. So that class you probably have to take.
All right, so I think everybody should be back now or coming back. There we go.
Yeah, I don't think everybody knows that they're unmuted either.
Yeah, folks
We're
want
gonna
to mute
remind
yourselves
everybody
when
to mute yourselves, please.
I mean, if it's one
Can you mute people, Renee, if they're talking to students?
Of course I can.
Thank you. All right, so I just want to take a moment to just check in and see kind of how your conversations went. If there's anything, any questions that came out of your conversations or anything you want to lift up for the larger group.
Our conversation was a little more about just how many student population we have that fall into this group. My biggest comment or my biggest win is I am a coordinator for the EDGE program, which is CTE offerings to our participants. And I have 3 transgender girls that identify as males, and I have business and industry instructors that I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a learning curve. But my welding teachers have come through absolutely with flying colors, with the way they've dovetailed this whole thing and just been able to bring the whole class together. I really think the whole class has come away with a real nice blending of appreciation and respect for everybody involved. I'm really excited about it.
That is great. Thank you so much for sharing, and it's nice to hear. I think sometimes we can, you know, like we can, from a place of like wanting to protect our kids, sort of feel a little bit worried about, you know, them going out into the world or into, you know, circumstances where we don't maybe have quite as much control. And so it's great to hear folks surprised you, pleasantly surprised you, and were able to create that space for them to really learn and thrive in their learning. So that's great. Anything else that any other questions, or any questions I should say, that anybody has that came out of your conversations?
I think a confession on my part, Kim, I'm just really embarrassed. Even at the start of this presentation, I said you guys, and I say that all the time, and I'm really trying to work on that. You know, we get stuck in things like that, ladies and gentlemen, you guys, boys and girls, and I think we need to really be more cognizant of that. So if I may offer my apologies, something I'm certainly trying to work on, and I think that was something we discussed in our small breakout group.
I absolutely can appreciate that and can identify with that. It's something that you will hear me probably have done it as well, and it's something that I'm working on too. It's a long habit to break that I grew up saying it, and so it takes a long time to break that habit. But yeah, so saying things like you all, y'all, I worked in an area where I could have a little Southern, you know, where I could say y'all, and that worked, and folks, and things like that. But yep, that's it's helpful to have that awareness of how those things can play out. I just wanted to mention the comment that was in the chat about using about the mistake that was made in class with the with the being a sub in a classroom. And I just want to, I'm sorry that happened, Jennifer. And I want to just acknowledge that it's something that's really important that we do as we are bringing guest teachers in or substitute teachers in, to make sure that the roster that we share with them, that it shows the name that students go by, and not the legal name that might be like on, you know, in other places in our student information system, so that when a sub comes in, they're not unintentionally like outing a student or causing harm. It puts a sub in a really, really awful position. We've heard a number of subs over the years just say like, oh my God, I felt so bad. I had no idea, like somebody didn't give me the information I needed. So you don't have to say like on your roster, and you shouldn't say like, oh, this kid's transgender, like that would be a FERPA violation, but to just list the kids with the name that they go by is really important and helpful. So just wanted to acknowledge that in the chat. And Sharon, I see you've got your hand up.
Excuse me, I'm sick, hence the picture I had up. But anyways, instead of saying like, I have a habit of saying, ladies and gentlemen, to get attention, even if they're like third graders, what would you say instead?
So it's a great question, and I have a feeling that the folks in the room might have some suggestions. So before I answer, if folks want to drop in the chat other terms that you use when you refer to your students broadly that aren't like gendered terms, I'm going to invite folks to put a list in there, and we can kind of learn from each other. So yeah, and there are already some like fun ideas, which is great. So I'm going to let that kind of sit there for a little bit. And while that list is being generated, I'm gonna move us on so that we can cover a little bit more territory. I know that our time is I'm I'm not rushing, but I just want to make sure that you get some of the information that folks are asking about, that you're asking about. So, all right. So the next part we're going to jump into here is around just the understanding experiences of our LGBTQ plus students. And what we know through, we have a couple of different surveys that I'm going to be sharing data from. One is from the Michigan Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which we do biannually with public high school students. We use a representative sample, so we know that we have enough schools participating that we can generalize the data to the state. So even if, you know, any one given like high school hasn't participated, it doesn't mean that the data doesn't apply. It applies to all public high school students. So what we know is about 13% of Michigan public high school students identify as LGBT. We don't ask a question that allows students to identify as questioning. And so for this particular data, I'll be just using LGBT. About 12% of our students identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and about 2% identify as transgender. That's similar to other states. We're not like an outlier in any way. And I think it's important to note too that our LGBT students are just as racially and ethnically diverse as our general student population. So our LGBT students fall into all racial categories. And if you're sort of thinking about the size of your school or a classroom, it's about 4 kids in an average classroom of 30. Or if you have a school of 1,000, you know, that's about 130 kids who would potentially fall into this category. All right, and then when we look at the data and we compare the experiences of our LGBT students to their heterosexual and cisgender peers, our LGBT students are about 3 times as likely to have been threatened or injured with a weapon at school. They're about twice as likely to have been bullied either at school or in an online setting. You can imagine if this is your like daily lived experience, like, I don't know, I don't want to spend 8 hours a day in that space. So we do see that our LGBT students are more likely to skip school because they felt unsafe, and a natural consequence of feeling unsafe or of not showing up at school is that your grades are going to reflect that. And I'm just going to ask folks to kind of hold this information, because this is what I just shared with you, especially for folks who are in our adult and alternative education spaces. That data right there speaks to why my guess is that for many of you, you have an overrepresentation of LGBTQ plus students in your classrooms and in your schools, because these students have a greater chance of either dropping out or being pushed out of school and moving into an alternative or an adult education program. I think we're much more comfortable talking about peer-to-peer harassment and less comfortable talking about adult-to-peer or adult-to-student harassment. And what we know is that our LGBT students report, about 1 in 6 report having heard school staff make homophobic comments. 1 in 3 have reported school staff making negative comments about a person's gender expression. And, you know, about half of our LGBT students feel disconnected from school. They don't have that sense of belonging. And again, all of this really speaks to why you probably have an overrepresentation of LGBTQ plus students in your settings. Some other things to keep in mind about our LGBT students: they're more likely to engage in self-harm behaviors like cutting. They're also more likely to have experienced trauma, like capital T trauma, having 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. Our LGBT students are more likely to have been pushed or kicked out of their home due to family rejection. That's higher for our transgender students than it is for our LGB students. Some studies show that up to 45% of homeless youth fall into this like broad LGBTQ plus category. And unfortunately, almost a quarter of Michigan public high school students, LGBT high school students, attempted suicide in the last 12 months. That's more than 4.5 times as high as it is for their non-LGBT peers. So that's really an epidemic in my mind, and really speaks to our responsibility as educators to ensure that our kids are safe. When it comes to specifically looking at the experiences of our transgender students, we know about 1 in 4 were prevented from using the name or pronoun that they go by. 1 in 3 were prevented from using the bathroom that aligned with their gender identity, and about 1 in 5 were prevented from wearing clothing because it was considered inappropriate for their gender. I think I just encourage folks to kind of pause, especially on the bathroom stat there, and really think about like what it would mean for you to not be able to use the bathroom that aligned with your gender identity for an entire school day, how that might impact your ability to pay attention, to focus, to do your job effectively, and to remember that you may have transgender students who are experiencing that every day. So again, I want to make sure folks have a chance to hear directly from young people about their experiences. So I'm going to share a few more videos. And again, I'm actually going to pause before the last one because it's very, very quiet. So I want to just give you a heads up to turn up your volume before that one. But here we go.
So I just wanna point it out there that I got called Miss today. Like I was buying hair care stuff, and he said, "Will that be all today, Miss?" I'm like, ooh, that felt good.
So the other day I was at work and I was working the register and bagging up groceries and all that, and this guy comes up and he's like 70, 80-year-old white man, American flag mask, camo hat, and he's just staring at me the whole time that I'm bagging stuff up, and he's looking for my name tag to my face and then like kind of around me, and I just looked at him, and then he looked at me and he goes, "Declan?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "That's a boy's name." And I said, "Yep." And then he looks back at me, and then he looks down at my name tag, and then up at me again and goes, "Good for you." This is the passive allyship we need, people. If you see a LGBTQIA person in the wild, just say "good for you" and continue moving on with your life. Also, what is this? Have a great day.
Hi, my name is Bryce Smacher. I am
Sorry.
17 and
Sorry, I'm going to go in a different order than is here.
Okay, well, I did it. I taught the first day back after winter break. I did it. Because of COVID, my classes restarted today, so I started with brand new students. And as per usual, on the first day, I asked students for their name, their preferred name, and their pronouns. We don't say preferred pronouns anymore, so I asked for their pronouns. And I'm just amazed at how many teachers don't do this. We're still not asking for pronouns. It's not that hard, teachers. It's not that hard. Asking for student pronouns is not that hard to do, and asking where it's safe for us to use them is so simple. Can I use this in our class? Can I use this outside of our class? And can I use this at home when I'm calling to talk to your parents or emailing your parents? I had 2 students tell me that they'd never been asked their pronouns before. One student was in tears because it was the first time they got to use their pronouns in their life.
So I'm going to share one more video, and I just want to highlight this one first because it's super, super quiet. So you really want to make sure that you turn your volume up. And this particular young person, video is just a little bit longer. This is a student from Michigan, and his name's Bryce, and he's going to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his experience.
a junior in high school. I go to a very small rural school in the Thumb. Our K through 12 is probably 650 to 700 kids. We're pretty small. I came out in about 7th grade, and I started transitioning right away. It was pretty good at first. I was able to play male sports, but the name thing was still incredibly difficult, and is still one of my biggest challenges coming into school. My Skyward, my email, all that stuff like that, anything that's legal purposes, it's my dead name. That's always what they've told me. It's a pretty big deal when it comes to schooling, because any new students, any new staff, that's all they see is my dead name, and then I have to go and explain, that's not right, okay? It's a very awkward situation for me, because sometimes they're like, oh, that's weird, and they'll have me go and explain further into detail, which I don't mind so much, as if they were more nice about it, I guess. This is my best way to explain that. My rosters on school say, for sports, they say Bryce, but it's more in quotations, like Bryce. So some people don't like to call me it. I know I've gotten issues with parents before because on the sheet that they give you at the beginning of games, it still says my dead name, which is pretty sucky in my case, especially since that's not right. I haven't been that name in years. I've tried my best to change it, but they've always came up with excuses like, oh, it's legal, we can't do that, your name isn't technically that, so we could get in trouble. There's a bunch of different things that come into play, and I wish it wasn't so difficult. I will be 18 soon, so I will be able to change my name, but it would have definitely helped my high school career out if I was able to go as Bryce on everything. There has been some pretty bad situations that I've been put in due to the fact of my name, and I want to get it out there that this is important. This isn't just kids overreacting or just wanting attention, because I've heard that too. This is them wanting to be happy in school, and having them have their preferred name, it helps with everything. It helps with their grades, it helps with their social life, it helps with their anxiety, it helps with a lot of things, and I wish I would have been given that opportunity, but I'm really glad that I can come on here and try to get the word out and make other people's transitioning a little bit better. I hope this segment helps you guys a little bit. I'm sorry I can't go that much into detail. I don't have that much time, but I hope it helped out a little bit.
All right. So that is Bryce, and I'm going to keep going here. Lori, would you drop the link to the gender communication plan in the chat? I think that that's what Kristen is referring to. Thank you. So I want to just highlight too and make sure that folks are aware that our LGBT students, as I said, they fall into every racial category and ethnic category that we have. But what we know is that our LGBTQ plus students of color, not only do they experience anti-LGBTQ harassment in school, but they also experience racism. And so when we're working with our students, we want to make sure that we're addressing and seeing them as whole people and not just one identity or another identity, but that if they come to us and let us know that they're experiencing, racism in school, that we're addressing that in addition to their identity. There's often some overlap between those things. So just wanting to be really clear that we're working with our whole kids and not just one aspect or another. Even if it might be easier, we're more comfortable dealing with one of their identities. We want to make sure to remember that they are all of their identities all the time, and they need supports that meet all of their identities, not just one at a time. All right. So, so I just wanted to make the connection here. So when our LGBT, when school feels unsafe, when our students are not supported, which we've seen in all of this data, that LGBTQ students, the impact of that is that they end up missing school because they feel unsafe. They skip school due to victimization. Sometimes they can miss school because they are pushed out. So when students miss school, they may end up facing school disciplinary issues, or even criminal sanctions for truancy, for missing school. Sometimes parents are held accountable for kids missing school too. There's like it becomes this connection between the school to prison pipeline when students are missing school because it feels unsafe. And then also, so they can miss school, they can be pushed out of school, and they can also drop out because maybe they're not doing well academically because they haven't been in school. Maybe they're feeling disengaged because they have been missing school. They just don't feel that sense of connection to school because they haven't been able to be a part of it. That sense of belonging that we know is a predictor of academic success, that when it's not there, which for half of our LGBT students it's not, that they may end up leaving school. And again, this is just really speaks to how students may end up in adult and alternative education programs, and why you might have an overrepresentation of LGBTQ plus students in those spaces. I also want to point out that it's important to remember that by the time that, you know, your LGBT students get to you, they have likely experienced a tremendous amount of bullying and harassment, and just anti-LGBTQ treatment. And so they may be particularly sensitive to those issues and may feel even more strongly about the need to be seen and to be able to show up as their authentic self. And so when you're working with students, you want to try really hard to really understand them, understand their experience, and to try to kind of meet them where they're at. You may be on the receiving end of trauma that they experienced prior to getting to you, but just know they're really looking to you to try to be, you know, somebody who can support and see them, so that they can show up authentically. So I'm going to share just a couple more data points, and then I want to pause for questions here. The positive thing to go along with all this really difficult data is that when our LGBTQ youth are actually affirmed, so when they feel supported in a space, especially when it comes to suicide, we see a reduction in the odds, that a 35% reduction when kids have one affirming space. When our transgender and non-binary youth have one gender affirming space, there's a 25% reduction in suicide attempts. So there are ways that we can mitigate all of these like negative things that are happening. And the thing that's important for you all to know is that schools have the biggest impact. So when school is the affirming place, it has the biggest impact in reducing the suicide attempt. So just want you to know that there's some good news out there. And also the things that you do to build resiliency in all of your youth are things that you can do to build resiliency in your LGBTQ youth as well. So you're already doing it. It's just a matter of making sure that you're being thoughtful about doing it with this particular population of youth. All right. I want to stop sharing just for a moment and see. I know there's been a bunch of stuff in the chat, and Lori, I appreciate that you are here and are taking the lead on stuff. That is fantastic. Are there any questions that haven't been answered yet that folks feel like would be helpful to have answered?
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
I teach adult ESL, and so a lot of times I'm also kind of, if I have a student who identifies in this way, I'm pushing back against more conservative cultures, and religions and an age. I mean, I have my oldest one right now is 74. So how do I be respectful of their culture and upbringing, at the same time, you know, lifting up those LGBT students? Because I mean, it's like trying to argue with my old grandpa, but when they can't understand the language as easily, that's where I struggle.
Mm-hmm. That totally makes sense. And yeah, you're in a unique position, and you've got this really wide range of experiences and age, and there's a lot of diversity in your space, which is amazing, creates a lot of opportunity. And I can hear how, you know, there might be some challenges. I think probably the most important thing that I can think of is going back to the video, which is that you don't have to understand somebody's identity to treat them respectfully, and to really just come back to that, you know, you don't have to understand, but in this space, this is how we treat our fellow students, regardless of their identities. And that's the expectation. We expect that they're going to treat you the same as somebody who's 74 years old, and that they're not going to, you know, disparage you because of your age, and they're going to be respectful to you. And the same is expected of you in terms of how you treat everybody else, and that it really just comes down to respect. So that's sort of, I think that's a place that you can kind of fall back on if you have group agreements or like classroom agreements, you know, making sure that those include being respectful if they don't already, that sort of naming that, and you know, just recognizing that there's diversity in the room, and that you don't have to understand to be respectful, but that there is an expectation that everybody will be respectful.
Thank you. And actually, that line from the video is one I jotted down. So
all right, great minds, great minds. Yeah. Awesome. All right, so we are like coming up on time, and I see that you have your hand up. Is it Lamar?
Yeah, I work with Courtney. Courtney, if you have problems with them, send them to me. Those folks that going to, I will deal with them, maybe in not the coolest manner or whatever, but I think it's important that we respect our students and their identities. And if other people are real slow at it, I'm sorry for them. I'm the
Sure,
one
I don't
that's-
have any of those situations. I
Right.
just was kind of in
Yep.
general. But
And you know me, and so I think on those things I would 1,000,000% lean into respecting our folks' gender identities. And if I hurt someone's feeling that doesn't get it, well, that might happen. And so I want just all of our folks to be comfortable. And I think slow growing plants sometimes need to be plucked. Sorry. I think other folks can go ahead and should learn and be respectful of other folks. And so, but Court, you know that of me. We'll just support our students the best that we can, be respectful of them, and that's how we're gonna lead. So
Thank you so much for weighing in. I think it's so important for folks to hear what the difference it can make when your school leadership has your back and is like really supporting you. There have been some great questions. Kristen, I see that you had your hand up. I just pause for 1 second because I know folks may have to leave. I'm going to share, well, if you haven't signed in, please be sure to sign in because I'll share the PowerPoint with you. And I will also pass along, we didn't get to the strategies piece. I mean, we talked about strategies, but we didn't get to the slides about strategies. I will share those with you, as well as probably our greatest resource is the State Board of Education's statement and guidance in support of LGBTQ students that we will make sure. Sorry, I'm just seeing that you're at Kent ISD, which we're doing a ton of stuff with Kent ISD right now. So it's so great to have Kent folks here. Yay, Kent. So we'll follow up, but make sure you sign in so that I can get you what we were going to share. And if folks want to stick around and ask questions, I'm happy to do that. Kristen, go right ahead. Thanks, everyone.
I was just going to say really quickly, Courtney or whomever else, I have a sibling who came out as transgender about a decade ago, and coming from a very deeply religious family, we've been working through it as a family, and it has not been easy. But the lessons that we learned apply in the workplace as well. And so if you do need to talk to somebody about it from the point of view of a cisgender white female who has lived it in life, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But I put in the chat, if you just approach it as a dignity, we're going to offer somebody their dignity. Most people can get on board with that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Kristen. I really, really appreciate it. Your vulnerability in sharing that. That's really powerful. Maya, you have your hand up.
Thank you. It's Maha, but no problem.
I'm so sorry. I just realized as soon as I said that, I was like, oh gosh, I think I didn't pronounce your name correctly. I apologize.
Not a problem. And I think two things that come up as a Muslim woman living in a community, like Courtney said earlier, asked about the students, you want to kind of be very sensitive to the religion or so on. So this is Dearborn. This is the heart of a Muslim community. And it's very difficult. And Kirsten, I commend you for coming and sharing this. I think this is the only way we learn. This is new territory for all of us. I mean, I grew up in an ultra religious home, and I have 2 teenage boys, and I also want to be very cognizant of the issues they face or they have different thinking than we do. And I remember I was telling in our little group just a quick story that really helped me maybe change some of my mindset. One of my son's classmates had come out over COVID as bisexual. And to me in the beginning, I'm like, okay, what is bi? You have to be this or that. Again, it's part of our ignorance that we don't know what this is. I'm like, how could you can only love one person at a time. And so my son was explaining that to me. And this boy, of course, could not tell his parents. And then my son asks me a question, because I was asking him and I was kind of challenging him. And he goes, Mama, are you a homophobe? I'm like, no, of course not. I accept people. And he goes, what if I told you one day that I was bisexual or gay? Would you accept me? And I paused for a moment and he goes, Mama, I'm not gay. I'm not bisexual, I'm straight, but I just want you to think about this for a moment from that standpoint. If you can't say, I accept you, I love you, I'll support you, that means you are a homophobe.
Wow.
And this is really how he got me thinking, oh my God, like you're right, our prejudices, our own biases toward things from growing up. I grew up in a very religious home. Till this day, you cannot say those words in front of my mom and dad, like everyone else. It doesn't matter your religion. So this is the awakening that I had. Is he had said, you know, Mama, this is how you do it. And I think you work through them and you accept them. It is not an easy journey because your background has a huge impact on your decision. But this is how we think about this. And then I asked myself deep inside, would I be okay if one of my kids were that? And I think if you cannot say yes deep down inside, I will love you and support you. It is my problem to deal with my own prejudices, with my own biases, with my own misconceptions about this. That is my issue as a mother. That's not their issue. We have to love them, accept them, whoever they are. So this has been the journey I've been on. And I'm thinking, you have to be prepared because things can change. You know, people come out in their 30s, people come out in their 40s. So you don't know. It doesn't mean that if you have a child who's married, has kids. So these are the things I think as a society, we will have, and again, generational, it's generation, my generation, you cannot say those words. You are absolutely raised to be a homophobe.
Ma, thank you so much. That was an incredibly powerful, and I like your vulnerability in sharing that. I am really grateful. I thank you so much, and it requires a lot to be able to sort of have that openness to be challenged. I think really speaks a lot. And yeah, there are absolutely communities where, you know, folks are raised where it's just not even spoken about, and speaking about it is can be dangerous. So I want to honor that, and we do have, you know, Muslim LGBTQ plus kids coming out, and finding resources and supports and keeping them safe can sometimes be really challenging. Not always. There are lots and lots of accepting, you know, Muslim families, and also, you know, there aren't as many resources sometimes in where we are, although there are more probably in our area because of the, you know, larger Middle Eastern population that we have, and larger Muslim population that we have. But, you know, finding helpful resources for families that are culturally appropriate and culturally humble can be more challenging and are incredibly important. So if there are people who are aware of helpful resources, please we would encourage you to share them. If you can share them, we would be really open. We're creating a list of resources so that we can make sure that when we have students, Muslim students in particular, who come out, that we can make sure that they're supported and that their families get support too. Any other comments or questions? Or this has been so amazing. Your sharing has just been incredible. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much, Kim and Lori. This has been a very, very informative session, very needed. We should have been talking about this for quite some time, and I'm just really glad to see so many of us here right now and engaging in this session. Truly, thank you. As a MACAE board member, I can almost assure you that we will be in touch for future sessions, because I just think we've scratched the surface here. You can see an hour was not enough time. So if it's okay, we'll be reaching out again in the future. Thank you so much. I hope everybody's able to get a quick bite to eat before our 4th round of breakout sessions start this afternoon. Again, thank you so much for attending. Just wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Thank you.